Hey there, Squirrel Army. How's it going? For today, we are discussing using the whole buffalo in Magic.
You can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing.
So what am I talking about? I'm not talking about actual buffaloes or whatever, but this is an old, or this is a kind of an old concept that has become new again in cooking, and that specifically and whatnot. But we can now apply this idea, the theory, the thesis of that into our games of Magic the Gathering and in EDH. And what does this saying, what does this phrase or whatever mean, using the whole of the buffalo? Well, in cooking and that, basically you don't want to waste anything that you get, especially nowadays when, meat is at a premium and it's taking up a whole lot of space on our planet and taking up a whole lot, or making a whole lot of greenhouse gases and all this sort of stuff, and it takes so many acres of farmland, and we have to knock down so many acres of, other types of, wilderness and forests and whatnot, that sort of things and whatnot. So again, those things are a premium, so we don't want to waste them. We want to make sure that we're using as much, if not all, of quote unquote the buffalo. In this case, it would be your pork, your chicken, your beef, because no, I don't think anyone actually eats buffalo or whatever. Maybe they do in some countries, I don't know. But again, it's just the saying as it sort of came together. But we can do this in Magic. We can do this in EDH. We can use the whole quote unquote of the buffalo in EDH. We want to not waste anything that's on a card. If a part of a card is somewhat relevant, or an effect is somewhat relevant to our deck, then that's good. If almost all of the text that's on a card is relevant to our deck, then that's even better. But if the entire text of a card is relevant to the game plan of our deck, that is quote unquote using the whole of the buffalo, because everything that is on that card is relevant to the game plan of the deck for what you're trying to do. And I don't know, I think I've seen this a few times here and there, but I recently was looking at Kiora, War of the Spark, Kiora Behemoth Beckoner, I think it is, which is a 3-mana planeswalker that when a 4-power or greater creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get to draw a card, and you can, it has 7 loyalty, and you can pay 1 loyalty and untap a creature. So in my Simic deck, which it is a Simic card, this card is quote unquote a whole of the buffalo card, because that deck is it turns everything into mana dorks effectively, and it has a few of these creatures that want to be tapped or untapped to do different effects and whatnot. So using their abilities to tap to add mana is very good. Obviously, that's something that a commander helps add to the deck already in Inga and Esika. And with Kiora now going, okay, well, also I will untap your stuff. That is, or at least one thing per turn, is pretty darn powerful, because again, you get that additional mana, which you want to use for your commander's ability to draw cards using 3 or more mana to cast creatures and that. And again, when you do cast big creatures, which is what you kind of want to do with that deck, hopefully at least, you will draw cards, like you won't get it for playing your mana dorks and whatnot that are in that deck. But again, you probably wouldn't draw many cards from those anyway, unless you've got some of the other cards that are there, but they are sort of, other cards as well. So you could still get that effect, especially if it's perhaps a 3-mana mana dork, because I do have some of those in that deck as well, because some of them are very effective at doing other things and whatnot. But again, it does depend on what the card is and what the deck is, but that's just one example of saying, I am using the whole of this card. Every part of this card is relevant. It's not so relevant as a Planeswalker, perhaps, or whatever, but that's not really the point or the problem or the issue for that deck, because it's not like it has to be 1000% creatures, but it does have to mostly be creatures. I think it's almost 40 creatures or even more, maybe. I can't remember. But again, like having that, those few random artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers and instant sorceries that are in there, even that is like almost at the limit of where I kind of want it, because the deck really wants as many creatures, and especially like when you're making all of this mana, you're making so much mana that you go, right, well, where am I going to put all this mana? So you really want places to dump your mana so that you can get other advantages, like Kinnan, Bond of Prodigy. I know that's a very high-level commander that a lot of people play on its own, but that's really great for that deck because, and again, it's a Hall of the Buffalo type card in that deck. And I don't want to just talk about this deck, but again, this is a really good example because all the mana dorks that I have in the deck, which is basically all the creatures that are in the deck because my commander turns everything into a mana dork, now tap for additional mana, which is very good because, again, that means that I will draw cards more often from my commander's triggered effect. Also, it's one of those things that it has that activated ability. So it has that mana sink, that mana dump on the card for you to, go nuts with and start getting more and more card advantage out of your deck. So again, you can really do some very powerful things by having that on the field, and it does a whole lot for you. Whereas, like, I had Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter, and this deck is a deck that casts things often at instant speed. So I was like, oh yeah, I get to, reveal the top card and play it if it's, mana value less than the card that I cast and things like that and whatnot each turn. That seems pretty good. But I was just like, it's too clunky and it's too hard to remember to do it kind of thing. So I'll often just forget that it's relevant. It isn't bad, but it isn't good enough for the most part. If it was every single card, then it'd be a lot better because at least then you'd be like, wow, I'm actually really getting my worth out of it from whenever I'm doing it. But it's only the first spell, so it's like, cool, I've got to remember just the first spell. Because, like, a lot of times you'll go, have I done it this turn? Type thing. Instead of going, oh, cool, I've done it and I've got my value out of it. You go, what did I get out of this thing? Did I really do it this turn? Have I forgotten it? And that kind of thing. So you just be like, what did I get out of it? What did I get out of it? Or did it go to my hand? What happened? What did I do? And then you start second guessing everything that you're doing, and you're just like sitting there, like, again, like, trying to resolve everything backwards in your head and going, what did I just cast? I just cast this, and then I cast this. And then trying to work back to going, what was the first thing that I cast on this turn? It was whatever. So, and again, it's just one of those cards that I was just like, I've heard people say that it's a really good card here and there and whatnot, but it just did not work for me, and it hasn't worked for me. I've played it a few times here and there, and it's just been absolutely the dog's balls, absolutely garbage, and just terrible because, like, any time that you do remember it, which I often will forget because it's such a forgettable thing, that it's like, and that's why it's this is why it's sort of so forgettable, is because you, again, can get into that problem of going, what did I get out of this thing? Was it even worth it? No, it really wasn't worth it. Like, I could have that Cascade card that all your 5-drops or more Cascade, I think it is. But I was like, I don't like Cascade because I don't like the Chaos, and I have too many counterspell type things that are in this deck that are on creatures that I don't really want to like cascade into, nor do I want to cascade into things that I just don't know, I can't control effectively, and there's not enough ways to quote unquote brainstorm things to the top so I know what I'm going to get. So it's just one of those things, even though sometimes you can know what the top card of your library is with things like Augur of Autumn and other things like that, Vizier of the Menagerie, etc. It's just one of those things where it's like you're kind of playing that game of going, what did I put on top again? Was it 5 mana or was it 6 mana thing? Because again, it's got to be less or whatever. So it's just one of those things that card was not a Hall of the Buffalo type card, and sometimes a card doesn't have to have a lot of text to be a Hall of the Buffalo type card. It can literally have one piece of text, like Beast Whisperer, that has one piece of text effectively, but everything that, again, is on that card is relevant to most of the decks, especially that deck, and most of the decks that I kind of play. But the problem was that I was going, especially in my tokens and counters deck, I want to be as focused on human tribal as possible. So I wanted cards that were humans that drew me cards or did me other good effects like that. And unfortunately, I haven't really printed a lot of them, which is a bit sad. But again, I wanted to try to make those sacrifices in those decks to make them a little bit more thematic and a little bit better off as a theme, as being quote-unquote semi-human tribal or mostly human tribal. So again, I made those sacrifices of cutting those cards out, despite them being pretty good, except for the piece of text that said that they weren't humans. So again, sometimes that creature type can be a piece of the quote-unquote whole buffalo. Again, if I said that I was now using the whole of the pork for the rest of this episode, when I've been saying the whole of the buffalo, the whole of the buffalo, the whole of the buffalo, throughout this whole episode, and then just said that once or whatever for no real apparent reason except to explain something like this or to make an example or to say, well, it doesn't really matter what I'm saying, the whole of whatever, etc. But again, I'm saying that getting away from that, subtype, that human subtype for that deck was detrimental in a way, or at least I felt like it was detrimental in a way that I didn't want to have. I wanted to be a little bit more restricted in some of the cards that I was using, but I also wanted to beef up the rest of the synergies that were kind of coming from the human tribal sub-theme. And it's not fully human tribal and that sort of thing, but again, I wanted to lean as heavily as what I felt I could, and perhaps in like a year or two or whatever it is, they'll print, a random human that does exactly what I want. But because now I'm running a couple of humans that I'm kind of going, I don't know about this. This doesn't seem actually all that good. Like, actually, Augur of Autumn it's funny that Augur of Autumn was a human. I didn't realize that it was a human as well. So I was like, wow, Augur of Autumn's a human? Wow, cool. That works for what I'm doing. So that was pretty good. Like, but Vizier of the Menagerie wasn't. So I was like, well, probably going to cut that, And I had a few cards that I was like, well, am I going to add this or am I going to add that? And in one of my decks, I'm still kind of debating whether I'm going to add this other Duskwatch Recruiter style effect. It's the new Duskwatch Recruiter effect from Brothers War. It's this white creature that you can only get 3 drops with. So yeah, that's a pretty cool card that is pretty powerful and pretty good. But it's just one of those things that, it's like it is a downgrade in a lot of ways from just like straight up draw a card or whatever. But it's just one of those things that, sometimes you make that sacrifice to kind of get that ability. And it was recruitment officer. That was the one that I was trying to think of. But again, I was making those, cuts and those changes, or potentially again making those cuts and changes to that deck because I'm like, well, I want to be as human tribal as possible. But then I was going, well, what is it going to replace? So, but again, it's just one of those things that it is all right if you've got extra mana laying around and that sort of thing, though I think Duskwatch is a bit better just in its generic ability, but the fact that it flips all the time and you can't really control its flipping and all of that sort of stuff is just another downside that you've got to kind of deal with. And the other one was Tireless Tracker, which, again, requires you to have lands and to get those clues to draw cards. So again, those are kind of big restrictions sometimes that do not pay off sometimes and that sort of thing, because sometimes I'm a very unlucky person and never get off my third land drop, and other times I will be sitting there with 50 lands on turn 2 or whatever, again, or whatever. Not literally, but again, it just feels that way where I'm just like, cool, I've got the all land hands and just not drawing any gas. Everything is a brick, and I'm just not going to do anything in this game. So, yeah, I'm not sitting here happy. That, or it's the complete opposite, as I say, of just going, cool, I've got 3 lands, but that's it, and I'm not really going to go anywhere else because I've not drawn my 4th land in, 15 or 16 turns, and the game's basically over at this point. So, cool story, boys. Let's go. But that's just one of those things that, again, trying to go, well, I want to be human tribal. And, I hope that in a year or two or whatever else it is, that I can find some cards that would replace them, that I would be happy with running. Because, again, I want to be mostly creatures. I don't want to just put in, like, something that works with just any tribe, like, what's the Anthem one? Like Icon of Ancestry, Herald's Horn, Vanquisher's Banner, yeah. Like Vanquisher's Banner, that sort of thing. Actually, I figured that Realm Walker wasn't too bad of a pick because Realm Walker is, again, almost a Vizier of the Menagerie, at least for that creature type. So that wasn't too bad, and it is technically a human once it's on the field because you choose that type for it, so that wasn't too bad, though it's not 100% exactly human tribal. It actually fits in because it's a shapeshifter, etc., so it actually does work, even though you're sort of stretching that line a little bit. But again, it's still not strictly human tribal, like, or whatever those decks are, because again, I've got other cards that are in there, like Oran Frostfang and things like that, just because they're super, super good, and I just could not, want to or need to try to replace them in that regard because they were just, like, I wouldn't have enough things doing the things that I wanted or giving me enough benefits for doing things. So I was like, oof. But actually, there's the Secret Lair, Tadius. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he has reach, which, yeah, whatever. But when he has this ability, which is basically a Toski ability, which is whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. So that's pretty good on a human because, again, that's a relatively new card, or it's at least the reprinted version of the Secret Lair Dazhim Pacifist card, which was the the fighting one. What was it? The Street Fighter one. Yeah, that one. That one. Yeah, I didn't really look at it till they printed the Magic version of it. I don't usually look at a lot of these secret lair exclusive Fortnite ones or whatever else that they're pulling out till they make the Magic versions of it, because I'm not usually into having a different IP in my Magic cards and whatnot. But this one was pretty darn decent once I realized, hey, wait a minute, this is a human, and it kind of works with the whole theme. Again, I'm using the whole of the buffalo. It's a human. It has reach, blah, blah, blah. It sort of has hexproof, and it untaps itself when it attacks. So it basically has vigilance. It is only a 1/3, but whatever. That's pretty irrelevant for the most part, and whatnot. You don't care about that. You just care that, when you hit with your creatures, you get to draw cards, which is pretty useful in an aggro, mostly aggro-based deck. So again, that whole theory of not one point of this card is sort of wasted. The fact that maybe some of the abilities don't seem to be like as impressive sometimes or whatever is like you thinking, well, like the fact that it sort of has pseudo vigilance. Well, yeah, you have to attack with it first, and it's no longer hexproof if you attack with it. But if you have some other stuff giving it hexproof, then, or ward or whatever, then that's a little bit better. And again, like you have some of those other effects to give things hexproof or ward or whatever sort of in that deck as well. So again, you're not just relying on it to do that thing. And I also have Sarath, the Viper's Fang, that gives all your things that are tapped Death Touch. So when they're attacking, they have Death Touch, and when they're untapped, they have Hexproof. So that's pretty useful. Again, like that trigger is a pretty, short trigger, and a lot of people don't really realize how it kind of works, and things like that, But then again, it does say it's hexproof unless it's attacking, not if it's tapped or whatever. But like, it's one of those things that it's still hexproof because has ward because I've got these other effects on it that say, hey, it still has ward, so they've still got to pay one to get rid of my thing that draws me cards or whatever, or it's still hexproof, so they still can't target it. They can target the thing that, is giving things ward or hexproof or whatever, because that doesn't have its own hexproof or ward for the most part. But again, that means that they have to use 2 of their removal spells to get rid of my things, or at least one of their removal spells, and then perhaps they can't kill the other thing. So again, I'm getting away with, having this thing on the board for another turn and to get my trigger off. So that's well worth it. And again, it fits within the realm of which those decks are kind of trying to function, which is semi-human tribal. And again, like as I say, they're not the best cards, because again, they're not 100% consistent. Tireless Tracker isn't very consistent, but the other 2 aren't too bad. Like Dustwatch Recruiter isn't too bad. Like even when it flips, like that you can't control that. But again, still that's not that bad because it's a big wolf on the other side. So that's not terrible. And some people might kind of just be like, well, I don't want, to flip it because I don't want to deal with the other side, but it's very easy to flip on those werewolves anyway as well. So it's kind of annoying sometimes to have it on the side that you wanted to have on it, but the other side is that your creatures cost less, which isn't too horrible. So at least there is some utility in that side. Not that, again, it makes up for the fact that it's no longer a mana dog, which would mean that it produces mana anyway, but reducing mana cost by 1 of every spell is pretty good, better than just being able to tap for 1 mana, certainly. So, there is that. But again, having that ability to tap it for its own ability is pretty stonks, especially at the end of somebody's turn. So, because it's an instant speed ability, so you could just effectively draw a card for your next turn and set up to start doing things. But anyway, I think I've dragged that point across that, this is a format of synergy, compounding synergies, and that's the way things are going. There's less and less generic things that are in the format nowadays, and more specific things. And I definitely think that in the next couple of years, or maybe in the next couple of months, that they will print more cards for more tribes that are more specific to, drawing cards within those tribes or ramping within those tribes. They actually printed a human that removes +1/+1 counters from your creatures to go fetch planes. So maybe they'll print something that's like that, but draws cards, or maybe looks at the top whatever cards of your library or whatever, or you can remove counters from stuff like you can with Bolas Citadel by paying, the number of counters equal to its mana cost or something. That could be really busted still, or whatever, but still, like, they might print some stuff like that to help bolster some of these other tribes. Not like they 1000% need it to a degree, but again, it's nice just to be able to be like, cool, my human tribal deck actually works the way I want it to kind of work and is, independently sufficient on its own. It doesn't really need, many of these other cards to really help it along, and it isn't too dependent on board state or whatever, or things sticking around for too long, hopefully, that, the whims of your opponents or whatever. Like, because again, I would replace Dustwatch, even though it isn't too bad, but I probably would replace it because, again, I would rather just something that's effectively, Beast Whisperer or whatever, or even something that's more like Mentor of the Meek, because at least then, again, the impetus is on me to be able to have those synergies of, drawing cards somewhere within the deck. But anyway, as I said, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Whether you think I'm right, wrong, or whatever, you can always let me know your thoughts down there in the comments below. And I hope you'll join me again in the next one.